Hi guys, welcome back and good to see everybody again. All right, we have got a lot to cover today. This is the new Air Venturi Avenger Bullpup 25 cal. It came to me by way of Air Venturi, and today I'm going to walk you around the gun and share with you what it is that I've learned about it so far. Then we're going to get into tuning basics that you can apply to your own air gun, no matter the make, model, or brand. And then I'm going to share with you 6 custom tunes that I've come up with, ranging from 43 to 58 foot-pounds. Of course, I'll share the OEM tune as well, but that's going to be a 25 grain Eco tune, two 25 grain Pro tunes, a 25 grain Hunter's tune, a 34 grain Pro tune, and then a Max Power tune. All right, so, and then I'll share with you the settings as well. I know that's really important to y'all, and we'll get into all that, I promise. But what's got everybody so excited about this gun is that for 400 bucks, you're buying a ton of adjustability and performance. What that means to you is you can set the gun up to your liking. You can get it to perform basically with most any type of ammo that the barrel gets along with. In other words, you can get that velocity right, so you can get the 50 and 100 yard performance out of it. You can set the gun up towards kind of an economical, lots of shots type deal, or a really powerful, not so many shots, but lots of punch type deal, and kind of everything in between. And that's what I'm going to be walking you through today. And then I'm even going to get into the different types of pellets and slugs that worked well across these 6 custom tunes that I've come up with. All right. But before I walk you around the gun, if you guys are new here, this is not my main YouTube channel. AEAC Vlog is an offshoot of the Airgun Exploration and Advancement channel, also called AEAC Home. It's over there that you'll ultimately catch a full review of this gun. What that means to you is 50 yard testing, 100 yard testing, trigger testing, sound testing, refill, and so much more. That's not what this is here. This is school. This is how I got to the results, and that other channel, those other videos, are the distilled down results. All right, so like I said, you're in the $400 price point here. These come in 17722 and 25. Without this piece right here, you're about 33 inches long. The gun weighed in 7 pounds 11 ounces for me, filled with air and nothing on it, and 9 pounds 12 ounces with a scope, with mounts, filled with air, with the moderator, no bipod. By the way, this bipod is an AEAC BR4 G2. For those of you that are going to want to know, all right, or want to know. Sorry, it's early and I haven't fully woken up yet. And we're also at a 10 on a 10-point scale with extreme pollen, so I got a little bit of a spaghetti brain. So if I sound a little bit weirder or more unnormal than I normally do, that's why. Okay, so end to end. So what you're seeing up here, this is an accessory moderator by Donnie FL. It's a new one. It's called the Fat Boy, and I have to say, this is an extreme value. This is a $175 deal. But what made me come away so impressed with it is for that 175 bucks, you're going to get the moderator, of course, which is a 1/2 inch UNF. It's just a thread-on type deal. But you're also going to get 3 air strippers with that. You're going to get a 17722, a 22, 25, a 25, and a 30. And what that means to you is that this one moderator, you can make work with all those different calibers. And not only can you make it work with all those different calibers, here's the air strippers, but you can actually use that as a tuning aid, not just to tune your sound to where you want it, but also to tune kind of turbulence behind the pellet or slug and really fine tune that accuracy once you get out to 50 and 100 yards. And with that, I gotta say, you know, I ran this gun between 43 and 58 foot-pounds. 46 foot-pounds was kind of where it was stock, and again, I'll share that with you, promise. But at that 46 foot-pounds, or even the 43, it's kind of a really loud type deal. So for me, this is almost a must-have if you want to be able to get that follow-up shot, or if you want to be able to do your tuning in your backyard and not get everyone around you all upset, that sort of thing. So new Donnie FL Fat Boy. We're going to get this out to 50 and 100 yards. I'm going to play more with these different air strippers that it came with for all of my backyard tuning stuff, I was running the largest air stripper, the 2530 instead of the 2225, and it was still pretty quiet. What you're going to gain by even shrinking down that diameter of that air stripper is a marginally less noise, but you may induce some turbulence behind the pellet or slug, which could take away from accuracy. But you're just going to have to do that work on your own, because the ultimate results are going to really come down to that tune, that pellet, that speed, those harmonics. And that's what's so cool about this, is this is a tuning aid, and so to have it here for a tuning guide has been truly a blessing. But again, this is an aftermarket accessory. What the gun's going to come with is this shroud over the barrel, and it's going to come with this little thread in guy, which kind of lives right about like yay. So I can't remember if there's any baffles in here. It just unthreads. I'll show it to you here. If you want to get in here for servicing or to clean and whatever, and we'll take a peek at this barrel. But come on. But when you buy your Donnie FL, you're also going to need an adapter. And this is what the adapter looks like. It's really cool. It kind of slides right over the barrel to kind of line everything up. I had no issues with clipping, which is really, really cool. And I had to take this moderator off every time I refilled the gun, because I just couldn't get that female phosphor fitting around the probe here. And I didn't have any point of impact change at 25 yards. But this just threads into here. And then that's where your moderator will go, right onto the end there. So you'll need to buy one of these as well. All right, come on. You can see it just unthreading here. It's just an aluminum shroud. And I got it all away. No, not yet. All right, here we go. All right, so there it is. It's a 577 millimeter barrel. It is choked. It's a 1 in 20 twist, we think, in talking to Air Venturi. And it's pretty pellet friendly. I ran like every pellet and slug I had through it at all different speeds and all different harmonics. That's why I've had about 3 weeks on this gun so far and coming up with all this. I really wanted to know exactly where I was at before I got in front of you guys. And at the end of the day, it does really well with between 43 and 58 foot-pounds. With the JSB 25 grain variants, with the JSB 34 grain variants, with the FX hybrids, with the Barracuda, H&M Barracudas, and with the JSB Hades over there. But honestly, guys, I couldn't get it to do well with anything outside of that. So this is going to be, you know, this is going to be the end all be all for me. But that's just kind of the way it goes with the barrel lottery. And I would encourage you to do your own homework and use this as a guide to get you started. That may not necessarily be, come on, the way it kind of ends up being for you. But that's how it shook out for me. All right. So yeah, loud as is, even at 43 foot-pounds, which is as low, by the way, as I could successfully get this gun to run. And that has to do with the hammer spring that came with it, the adjustability of that hammer spring, the valving, the regulator. We're going to talk a lot about that today, but that's as low as I can get it to run, which is about 870, low 870s with a 25 grain. And I really would have liked to have seen this been able to, I told you guys, I can't talk yet today. I really would have liked to see the 25 cal Avenger be able to perform kind of in that 830 to 840 to 850 velocity, foot per second velocity with the 25 grain. But even at a super low reg pressure, I basically ran out of hammer spring. There was too much hammer spring. So I would have either needed to go to a lighter spring or had less tension on it to make it work with those low reg pressures of around 2,000, 1,900, 21, 2,200, that kind of thing. But again, we'll get all into that. Before I get too much further in this walk around, I just kind of want to give you a little bit of an overview of, like I said, what's got people so excited is for the $400 price point, you've got a ton of adjustability here. So kind of on the note of what we've been talking about, we have an externally adjustable hammer spring on board. We've got an externally adjustable regulator on board. Those two things by themselves are huge for this price point. But it doesn't stop there. We have an adjustable trigger, we have an adjustable butt pad, we've got an adjustable cheek piece, onboard magazine storage, and it just kind of goes on and on. So that's this gun's calling card. It's also a great tuning tool if you want to get into learning how to tune air guns. I know $400 is a lot of money in general, but in Airgun PCP land, it's not. These easily work their way well into the 2000s for the competition level type of stuff. So at the end of the day, this gun is offering a ton of performance, power, adjustability for the money. All right, so rolling on down here, you can see there's pick rails everywhere. There's one on top here. There's one on the bottom, so you can mount a bipod. You've got one on each side if you want to put a flashlight or a laser on there for a little bit of night hunting. I will say this pick rail up on top is mounted really high, and I think that, which is putting the center of this scope way above the center of this barrel. At least, I'd say it's got to be at least 3 inches. And I think the reason they've done that is because of this adjustable cheek piece back here. The way this adjusts is there's a little depression, spring depression here, and you depress it. You need a little tool. But it also slides totally off. So I think because they wanted to add this, they needed to get the scope up higher. But if you just want to slide this totally off and run with your cheek right up against here, this is actually really smooth. And if I owned this gun and I didn't have to run such a high deal up here, that's what I'd be doing. I would just take this off to be able to snug this gun up nice and cozy here and not have such a high center line of the scope up above that barrel. But anyway, it's a very nice welcome addition for the price point. All right, rolling on down the back here. Now this butt pad, I have to say, when I first experienced it, I thought it was a little bit hokey because it's like rubber banded in place. But so you can move it around. So when I was doing all my bench work, I was kind of up here in this area because I was really low on the gun. You know, but for carrying around in the field or for wanting to prop it up on the table here, it's nice. You can drop it down really low. This low position is nice because you can get the gun up nice and high. You know, but this is about where my line of sight is going proper through the scope. And I felt that like that was a little bit hokey just because it's, you know, it doesn't, these always take tools, you know, to move around on every other gun. But I have to say, it was all good. It didn't feel hokey when I was actually using it, and I came away really appreciating the fact that I didn't need tools to adjust it on the fly. It's nice and wide. It's a grippy rubber, and I think that this is as weird as it is initially getting used to. I think a lot of people are really going to enjoy it. You can see the magazine storage here on the bottom. They just pull out and push in. There's nothing to that. There's nothing in the manual on how to pull these in and out, and I must say it took me a little bit of a while. Told you guys that to figure this all out, but basically they only go in one way with the flat part or the bottom of the magazine towards the rear of the gun, and then they'll just snap right in for you. That said, these mags were excellent. I was able to fit all sorts of Zan slugs and H&N slugs and JSB slugs and Nielsen specialty ammo slugs and all the big 34 grain stuff in there, no problem. The gun also comes with a single shot tray, which I used a lot for my making of my shot charts and my tuning, just because it was easier than having to load the magazine. I could just drop the pellet in and cycle and go each time. Let me get you back down. There we go. Isn't that nice and convenient? All right, now side lever cocking, it's in the rear, so it's not going to be the most comfortable thing. This is kind of very old-fashioned. Side lever cocking today on the multi-$1,000 PCPs is kind of migrated up here to where you can stay on the target a little bit easier. This can get a little tough back here, but on the bench, this is great. And this will make a great bench gun. I shared with you the weights. The funny thing about this is, excuse me. Funny thing about this is They've also got a rifle version, which came out first a couple of years back. I've got a full review of that on my other YouTube channel already. It was a great 50 and 100-yard performer. On this channel, I've got a full tuning guide on it. It was the 22 cal. So now you're going to have two tuning guides. But it was interesting because that gun was like almost a foot longer than this, but weighed almost a pound less. And I think that has a lot to do with this stock. This stock is a huge upgrade over that. I know when I reviewed that gun, some of you had some concerns that it felt plasticky and kind of hollow and kind of toy grade. If that bugged you, and it didn't bug me, I loved how the featherweightness of it. But if the stock was a pain point for you, this is a huge upgrade. The material is much thicker. It feels more like I'm a big Glock guy. It feels like the poly on the Glocks where it's grippy and it's a little bit sticky, and when your hands get moist, it just feels like a huge upgrade. But it's a heavier deal. This pistol grip is also a huge upgrade. It's nice because you can come up here and you're not kind of back in this way. You can have, it does well with the shorter bullpup design. That verticalness is just much more comfortable on the wrist. You can see the very natural position my wrist is in, and it's a great grip. Like, I don't have the biggest hands in the world, but it was just fine for me. All right, and I think a lot of you are really going to dig this. It's bedded really nice too. If you pull the stock out and peek in there, it's just full of tons of thick, heavy-duty polymer. It just has a much better overall feel. Now, you'll notice and this confused a lot of people, and I should touch on this, and I'm getting ahead of myself just a little bit here. But the gun's going to come with two pressure gauges on it. One pressure gauge is going to measure the amount of air pressure that's left in your reservoir here, which runs here, and there's a little bit more under here. It's 180 cc's total, 300 bar fill, which is a lot. That's 4,351 psi for us Americans, I think. And I lost my train of thought there. But hold on, I'm having a senior moment. This is what happens when you wake up too early to do this, and you get a lot of pollen jammed up in your head. But Jesus Christ, where the hell was I? Oh yeah, gauges. Whoo! All right, so there's two pressure gauges on here, and that's confused a lot of people. One gauge is going to let you know how much air is in that 180 cc reservoir, and the other gauge is going to tell you where your regulator is set at. And if you're new to all this, I'm going to teach you all of this. Regulator, hammer spring, valve, all of this stuff, so it doesn't have to be so intimidating. But very basically, speaking in basic terms, what the regulator does, guys, is it controls the air that your valve sees. It controls the pressure that your valve sees, and it keeps that pressure consistent. And so when your valve is taking gulps of air out of that body of air that the regulator is kind of managing, it helps keep that pressure on that valve consistent, and that's going to translate into consistent velocity, which translates into consistent accuracy across your shot chart. All right, again, we'll get more into that. But when I reviewed the Avenger, a lot of questions were, I don't understand, I've set my regulator to 2,500 psi, but it's only showing 2,000 psi. Well, if you only have 2,000 pounds of air in your reservoir, your regulator is never going to see more than how much air you have left in your reg. So that's something to be aware of. If you have your reg set at 2,500, you're going to need more than 2,500 pounds of air in your reservoir for you to be able to see that on the gauge. And that's what we call falling off of the regulator. Once the air pressure in the reservoir drops lower than where your regulator is set at, then you start to see that shot chart tailing off. Or if it's tuned improperly, it can actually come up. But again, we'll get into all of that. All right, trigger. So I don't know if Air Venturi markets this as a two-stage or a single stage, but it definitely came out of the box feeling like a single stage, and not a great one. It broke at around 2.5 pounds, I want to say. It had a really long kind of rolling break before that sear would kind of disengage and let that trigger go off. And so I got on the owner's manual here. It does have pretty good instructions. And I had really good success turning this trigger into a 1 pound 6 ounce dual stage trigger with a nice clean and light light and long first stage pull, a nice well-defined stop that was very resettable, and a fairly clean break with just a little bit of roll in it. I wasn't able to get this bullpup trigger into the match grade place that I was able to get the rifles trigger. And that's something that you're going to want to be aware of if that's important to you. That all being said, I was able to get it into a place that was 9/10 as good. So it may not matter to you. But if you're doing really long range precision work, that could come into play and it could affect your accuracy because there's going to be a little teeny bit of a roll at the end. And if I haven't said it already, I'll put my trigger adjustments up here on the screen for you so that you guys can look at them. But here's what it looks like. So there's the, here, let me do it this. Here's the first stage. After I got done with it, right there, it's resettable. And then if you watch closely, if I pull through it pretty quickly, you're not really going to see that last little bit of roll. But if I do it slower, I don't know if you're going to be able to see it or not. Let me get my face here because the camera is a face focal lock type deal, so you guys can see here. All right, putting the pressure on. Yeah, there's about, I'd say maybe 1.5 millimeters of roll before it'll let off. And that was a little bit of a bummer, but at the end of the day, I didn't see it affecting my accuracy at 25 yards. And I'm going to share all that with you here. I would call the accuracy excellent, and this wasn't a detractor, but whether it remains not a detractor at 50 and 100 is yet to be seen. And I'll get out there and start doing that work in the coming weeks. All right, what else do we want to talk about here before we roll on? Yeah, we should talk about this side cocking a little bit more. I touched on it earlier. So very smooth. At 43 foot-pounds, I'm going to call it pretty light. Up here at 58, which is what you're seeing it at now. Pretty heavy. Like, I'm pretty sure that... No, I thought it was going to move the gun. On this grippy counter, it's not, but on my poly shooting bench over there, it'll actually start moving the gun when I pry on it. And it can be easily decocked. The safety is manual, and it's great. It's in a good location. Can be toggled on and off with your thumb up here. And it's nice and smooth and slick. I don't think anyone's going to have any beefs about that. Scope, I'm running a Hawk Air Max 30 SF Compact. This one is a 3 to 12. I think it's a 40 millimeter bell. I've run this scope before. It's phenomenal. I think you're about the $400 to $430 price point, depending on what magnification you go with. I think they have two. The one thing to be aware of with this scope is the eye relief is really short. It's like 2 inches. So, which is actually works really well with this pick rail because you can get back to a place where you're proper on it. I have full vision right there. So, maybe 3 inches. Might have misspoke there, but something to be aware of. You may need a mount that offsets it and gets it closer to your eye if you want to run it. But Sports Match Rings UK mounts, and yeah. So like I said, I spent 3 weeks on the gun. It was a ton of learning, and we're going to dive all into that. Oh, duh! I got to show you some of the most important stuff. I almost forgot. So the externally adjustable regulator is accessed on the bottom here. Hold on, I want to put this in a place where I'm not going to knock over all my pellet tins. All right, it's right here. A little bit of a flap. Okay, it's just this little I don't know if it's a rubber. It's more of like a vinyl, and it pops up and it's going to expose 2 ports here. One port is your degasser, which is going to allow you to drain all of the air from this tube. And that's going to be important because there's a couple of cardinal rules to adjusting the regulator on your Avenger, okay? If I take a screwdriver and, hold on, got to see here. Yeah, all right, good. If I take a screwdriver and I put it in this first hole, I'm going to pick up that regulator screw. It's a flathead. There it is, okay? To increase regulator pressure, I'm going to turn this counterclockwise. That's opening up the regulator so that the valve sees a higher pressure. Okay, so that the valve is working into a higher pressure body of air. And I can do that no problem when there's air in here. I recommend you fill it up to probably at least 4,000 PSI before you start doing that, because the regulator had some challenges kind of seating and giving me an accurate reading, unless I was doing this work up around 3,500 to 4,300 PSI. All right. Now, if you want to decrease regulator pressure, you cannot do that while there's air in the gun. You will damage your regulator. It's also, if I turn to this clockwise to do that, it's probably going to be really, really tough to do so because you're working against all of the 3,000 or 4,000 pounds of air that's in here. So never go clockwise or decrease your regulator pressure when there's air in the gun. Always just go counterclockwise to increase it. And that's where this purge Allen here, I think it was a 3mm. I'm like the grip here is like rubbed off. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's 3mm. But anyway, to purge the air from the gun, all you're going to do is open this up like a quarter turn. Okay, and you're going to leave it at that, an eighth of a turn is really all it took. Just don't go more than a quarter of a turn. Leave it at that eighth turn until it drains, and then I'm going to take my screwdriver and I'm going to go clockwise to gently, completely seat that regulator. And then I'm going to open it a quarter turn, and that's going to be my starting point. And it's going to be really low. It's going to be at like 500 PSI. But you do want to make sure you open it that quarter turn before you refill the gun so that the air can get past it and the valve can see it. All right, so things to be very mindful of. And then when you adjust that regulator, when you increase that pressure from that quarter turn or 500 PSI or whatever it is, when you're narrowing in on where you ultimately want to be, whether that's 2,000 pounds, 2,500, 3,000, what have you, open this in like the littlest cracks at a time that you can. Because you'll notice the gauges, they won't move and then they'll jump. You'll open, and then the gauge won't move and then it'll jump. It kind of tends to do that at the lower PSIs, not so much at the higher PSIs. So around 2,000, 22, 2,300, that was a struggle. I had different struggles up around the higher PSIs, and we'll get into that later. But just something to be mindful of. Go a little bit at a time. But now, obviously, if you're at 500 and you want to start at 2,000, I just take it and I just start turning it while I watch the gauge. And you'll see that pressure slowly coming up. And when I get to maybe 1,750 or 1,800, I'll go ahead and start doing those little micro turns with it. That being said, it's going to take most regulators a couple of shots to seat after you adjust them. There's a bunch of little plates, springs and plates in that reg that move around that control that volume of air, so you get that nice steady pressure to the valve. And you're going to want to dry fire the gun after a regulator adjustment, I would say a minimum of 4 to 5 times. And give the gun a solid 5 to 10 seconds between shots for that regulator or for that plenum to kind of take a breath and that air to work through the regulator. And then you'll probably be in a pretty good seated place. Again, that regulator may take more dry fire shots to seat down around 2,000 PSI setting than it might up around a 3,000 PSI setting. So just be aware of that and play with it, and you'll be fine. But that's just kind of a little regulator guide for you there. But all those adjustments are right here, right? The other adjustment is the hammer spring, and I'm going to teach you how to do all that, but it's accessible through the back of the gun here. I had about 6 total turns of play in that hammer spring, and I used all of them. I had success at 0, and I had success up around 6. So what does that mean to you? Well, backed all the way off or fully counterclockwise is 0 turns, as I'm going to describe to you through these custom shot charts I've done for you here. But if I say +1 turn clockwise, that's starting completely backed out, and you'll feel it stop when you go counterclockwise on this till it's backed out. It'll stop And you don't have to crank on it. And then when you go clockwise, that 5.5 or 6 turns, it'll stop at that end too. But that's about the range you've got. But I like to take a silver Sharpie and make a mark up at the top here so I can count. And, you know, it's okay to make, you know, if you back it all the way out, it's okay to put a full turn on it and then maybe a second turn. Maybe I want to start at 3 turns, whatever. And then when you get really close on the tune, start moving this in micro turns, maybe an 8th turn, 10th turn, because that's where you're going to really find these beautiful balance points. I left these kind of raw to get you in the general facility. You know, by raw, I mean 1 turn, half a turn, 3/4 of a turn, quarter turn. If you started getting into like the little micro turns, you could really smoothen these out, and these are still pretty darn good to begin with. But I'll teach you all that here in a little bit. So those are your adjustments on the gun and some basics there for you. All right, so one of the most common questions I would get from you guys is, well, what you've taught me here, can I apply to my own air gun if it's not an Air Venturi Avenger? And the answer is absolutely yes. One of the cool things about this channel, guys, is I've been able to do a lot of tuning guides for you now. So this will be 2 Avenger tuning guides, 1 and 2.2, 1 and 2.5. We've done a Day State Red Wolf tuning guide, which is all electronic, pulse width and voltage and all of this crazy stuff. And I've done a lot of the FXs. So Maverick, Dreamline, Crown Continuum, Impact. I've got another Impact 1 coming here in another month or 2 for the new M3. So any of those lessons that are learned across any of those half a dozen tuning guides can be applied to any air gun. All you're doing is balancing regulator pressure with hammer spring tension, right? If you remember anything from today, that's really what I want you to just kind of come away from this with, that any of this can be applied to any air gun, and all you're trying to do is find those balance points. When something is out of balance, you're going to wind up with a shot chart that looks like this, or looks like this, or looks like this. And here's the best way to think of it. So going back to that regulator, what the regulator's job is to show the valve a consistent pressure reading all the time. So when your valve is opening and taking bites out of that air, those bites are equal size, because the valve's going to send air up to the pellet, and that's what's going to control your velocity. So here's the simplest way to think about it. Think about like a large air reservoir over on this side, okay, and it's got a ton of air in it, lots of pressure, and then it's got a little regulator which is kind of controlling the pressure as it comes through to the valve over here. And your valve, when your hammer smacks that valve, your valve has to open into that body of pressurized air over here. And so that's what the hammer spring tension is all about, guys. If I have a high regulator pressure setting, I need more hammer spring tension so that that valve can open into that heavy pressurized body of air to be balanced. If I have a nice low regulator pressure setting, then I don't need as much hammer spring tension over here for that valve to be able to overcome that and take a bite out of that pressurized air. And that's what this balancing is all about. If I have a really high reg pressure and a really low hammer spring tension, it's not enough oomph for that valve to be able to overcome that pressure and open and take bites. And you get these like little bites. You know, the same can be true for if I have a really low regulator pressure setting and a really high hammer spring tension. There's nothing holding it back. So now my valve's taking like gigantic bites of air, you know, out of that. And it's just, and you've got shot charts that are terrible. The way you get nice, smooth shot charts is all you're doing, guys, is just balancing those two things out. That's it. So I don't want you to be afraid of this technology. Now, when you get into some of the FXs, there's rebound and fine-tuning and pulse width and some of these other crazy stuff. But for a lot of these simpler air guns where it's just hammer spring and regulator or just hammer spring, these are the things that you want to be aware of. So what I did is I came up with three models that are going to be help you understand just tuning basics, kind of like what we were just talking about. And the first one I wanted to share with you is called the descending shot chart. All right. And the reason I wanted to share this with you first is because most air guns that I've experienced are going to come to you looking kind of like this, with a shot chart that starts at a high velocity and it comes down to, over time, it comes down to a lower velocity. All right. And this isn't great because your accuracy changes at distances like 50 and 100 yards as your velocity changes. So you want to be able to level that descending shot chart out. But what typically causes this scenario is too much hammer spring or not enough regulator pressure. So if I've got an air gun with a descending shot chart, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to back off of that hammer spring setting so that, because right now it's taking too big of a bite for that regulator pressure setting, all right, inside the gun, and it's giving you all this oomph up here, but as the pressure drops on the regulator, it's actually the pressure so low that that valve is opening and closing so quickly that it's not able to gulp any air, and that's why you get this weird descending looking thing. So if I have an air gun that's doing this, the first thing I'm doing is I'm backing off of that hammer spring tension. And what you'll find is that this chart will eventually start to level off, and you'll find a place in there where it's perfectly level. Now the caveat comes where you may find that place where it's perfectly level, but you're no longer at 900 feet per second. Now you're down around 800 feet per second across all of this. And that can be no bueno, all right? The other way to overcome this, a descending shot chart, is you want to increase the regulator pressure. And what you'll find that also does is it brings up the tail. It brings up the tail of that descending shot chart and kind of levels you out, because it's what it's doing is it's bringing things back into balance. So if I have an air gun that does not have an externally adjustable regulator but has an externally adjustable hammer spring only, I'm limited. Yeah, I can get that flat, that shot chart nice and flat, but I'm not going to be able to, but that flat shot chart might be down around 800 feet per second, and that's not particularly useful, right? So that's where an adjustable regulator comes in on something like the Air Venturi Avenger here. Wherever I'm at, 800, 825, 850, 875, 900, 950, whatever, I can always bring both of that regulator and that valve into balance so that I can get a nice flat shot chart across whatever velocity that I want. And that's the beauty in this, all right? The other, the next most common thing I will see in an out-of-the-box gun that comes to me is what I like to call the shark's teeth shot chart, all right? It's where the shot chart is relatively level, but you kind of get a lot of this. And what that means is that you're kind of close on the tune as far as that regulator pressure and that hammer spring being in balance with one another, but something's off. It wants a little bit more hammer spring tension or a little bit less hammer spring tension, or it wants a little bit more regulator pressure or a little bit less regulator pressure. If I saw this, the first thing I would do is I would try to bump up that regulator pressure a little bit to stabilize that valve opening into that pressurized body of air. Because sometimes when you don't have enough regulator pressure setting and you got kind of a lot of hammer spring over here, that valve or that hammer smacks that valve, and that valve, when it opens into that body of air, the speed at which it opens and closes can be inconsistent. Also, the depth at which it opens and closes can be inconsistent. And you can actually stabilize that by adding a little bit more reg pressure. Or in this case, I had this challenge with the EcoTune, and I'll share this with you in a little bit. I actually needed less hammer spring, and I just wasn't able to get there. So backing off the hammer spring can do it also. So I know that's a lot and confusing, but this means you're close, and it could take one or the other or a little bit of both, or you're close. So you want to just start making those micro movements when you get this. All right. So this isn't very common, but you can put yourself into this area by mistake, and that's where you have an ascending shot chart. That's where you start out low. And I've heard guys come on my channel and they'll comment, how come as I go, my velocity gets higher and higher and higher and higher and higher? Well, if that happens to you, you need to increase your hammer spring tension, okay? or you need to decrease your regulator pressure. And again, playing by the same rules, that'll bring those things into balance. Again, if you have a gun where you can only adjust hammer spring and not regulator, all you can really do is increase your hammer spring tension to bring that, that side of the graph up and kind of level yourself out. So those are the basics of tuning that you can apply to any air gun. Again, not to precipitate, I think that's the word. If we don't want to do too much of that, because you guys will go to sleep or click off. But if you're taking notes, the thing I really want you to try to remember is you have an air reservoir over here with a lot of pressure on it. The regulator is managing that and trying to show the valve equal amounts of air so that when the valve opens and closes into it, it's getting consistent bites. But if you have a regulator pressure that's too high for that hammer spring setting, that hammer spring setting is not going to be able to get in there and take the proper size bites of air to level it out. If you've got one that's too low, again, maybe that hammer spring is going to come into it and take too big of a bite of air, and or that valve is, and you're just going to wind up with a really cattywampus tune. And that's really all we're doing here, guys. So it's nothing to be afraid of. You're just trying to balance out those forces within the gun. And when you nail it, you're going to get a nice, smooth, flat shot chart. And what's really cool about this is I can go from a position of the OEM tune on this gun, which, by the way, I guess I'll share this with you here. So this is, I used a 25.39 grain JSB. I ran it from 4,300 down to 19 PSI, okay? The regulator pressure out of the box was set to 2,600 PSI. I had good luck, I want to say between 2,300 and 2,900 PSI. The manual, what does the manual tell us? The manual for the 25 cal says 2,900 PSI. Go figure, it came out of the box at 26. That's why this stuff's so important to kind of understand, guys, because you can really get a lot of juicy goodness out of your air gun. All right, but average was 903 feet per second with a 28 ES and a 6.5 SD. Not a great ES and an SD, but nonetheless, it was good for 40 shots at 46 foot-pounds. Now that's going to be ideal for close range shooting with the 25 grain, because up around 903 feet per second, guys, most pellets are going to begin to destabilize. Kind of the sweet spot is, depending on the twist rate of the barrel and the choke and the length and harmonics and all this other stuff, the sweet spot is normally 850 to, I'll say, 880 for a Diablo-shaped pellet. Now, if you have a redesigned shaped pellet, which is shaped less like a parachute and more like a tic-tac, you can push these pellets a little bit faster. They'll do well at 850, 860, 870, but they'll also often do well at 920, 930, again, depending on the barrel and some other stuff. But the further you stray away from that 850, 860, 870, 880, you start to destabilize that pellet, and you'll start to see it past 40 yards. And so it's a detractor from accuracy. So that kind of makes this out-of-the-box tune really good for 35, 30, 40 yard hunting, where you've got a little bit more oomph at the expense of some accuracy and some efficiency. So this OEM tune was, the reg was set to 2,600 and the hammer spring was plus 1.2 turns clockwise, which means the way I measured that is I backed this hammer spring all the way out to the left counterclockwise, and I started moving it to the right clockwise until it was one full turn and then 1.2 turns. And that's where the sucker was set up out of the factory, which is very interesting because you got 6 turns of hammer spring there, and it's only using one of them. And that's another common mistake. You see people like, I want more power, I'm going to turn up my hammer spring. Well, that's all well and good, but turning up your hammer spring or increasing the tension, if your regulator pressure isn't high enough, will actually decrease your power. So, you know, just things to be mindful of in wrapping your head around this and trying to understand it. All right, so let's get into some of these tunes. Let's start with my eco tune. Here it is. So eco tunes can be really, really great. In my head, when I want to come up with an eco tune, I want to be 850, 860, 870, something like that. I want to get that velocity down because I'm going to be using that for pesting, you know, 30, 40, 50 yards, where I want to fill up the gun one time, go out, take it with me hunting, and get as many shots as possible at kind of those lower velocities so that I don't have to be refilling in the field. So I call it an eco tune. With that 25 grain, like I said, 850, 60, 70, somewhere kind of in there is a sweet spot. All right, and I was able to achieve that with the Avenger 25 down around 43 foot-pounds. And here it is, JSB 25 grain variants again. Regulator set to 2300 PSI and 0 turns on the hammer spring. So my hammer spring is backed all the way to the left until it stops. I must have had 5 or 6 of these shot charts before I finally settled in on one. How did I come up with the 2300 PSI on the reg? Well, I knew from my experience with the 22 cal Avenger that one ran very well around 1900, 2000, 2100 PSI, and I thought that this one would do the same. And the reg itself may, but there's not enough there's too much hammer spring tension in here, even backed all the way off to work well at those lower reg pressures of 1900, 2000 PSI, that sort of thing, okay? So basically the way I tuned this is I backed the hammer spring all the way off, and then I went in search of a regulator pressure that would work with that hammer spring tension backed all the way off. And I tried them all, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, and I came away with this 2300 PSI and 0 turns. What's cool about it is that I got 56 shots out of this little 180cc reservoir. Now, mind you, it's a 300 bar deal, so there's a lot of pressure in there. But I got 56 shots at 43 foot-pounds with an average of 873. That 873 is a beautiful sweet spot for the JSB Diablo variant of pellets. And you normally get tremendous accuracy, and I got tremendous accuracy out of this tune. A nice ES of 24, standard deviation of 6.1. You definitely want, you normally want your extreme spreads at less than 20, 25. Otherwise, you'll start to see point of impact changes when you start to get out there towards 100 yards. Okay. But yeah, very ideal for the 25 grain variants. So what is that? That's the JSB 2539, the FX 2539, the Daystate Ranger pellet 2539s, the Air Arms 2539s. Here they are, the Rangemaster King 2539. JSB makes all of these pellets. You'll have to try them to see which one your barrel likes, and that's even going to differ from batch to batch, pellet batch to pellet batch. And if you've seen my factory tour video of the JSB plant in the Czech Republic, and you see all 65 or 70 of those machines cranking out pellets at the same time, with their dies in different states of wear. That's what we mean when we talk about pellet batches. You'll get like a whole crate of pellets, which will be your barrel alike, and then the next one it won't, just depending on where that die is in its state of wear. So there's a little bit of myth busting for you. They use pretty much the same dies for all of these pellets. Some of these companies like FX, they insist on a brand new die. And Air Arms, I actually stand corrected. I think Air Arms likes a little bit of a, I think they like their own special die, if I remember. But that's between them and JSB. But they're all very similar. It's a takeaway, and you got to try them all. But now, if you look at this shot chart, you'll see that it's got a little bit of the alligator thing going, and that's because I tried going up on the regulator pressure. It didn't get it out. It didn't eliminate it. It actually made the tune worse. It made it shorter. It made it choppier, which told me that I needed less hammer spring. And I had the thing on the minimum it could go. So if it could go even more minimumer, or if it could have a smaller hammer spring put in there, I think I could have, gotten this ES down around 20 and that standard deviation down around 4. But this is very good by itself. This will serve anyone well out to 50 yards for sure. And you guys can have a full day of pesting on one charge. So that's the beauty of the Eco Tune. Yeah. So let's let's keep moving. I think that's all I wanted to share with you about that. So Pro Tunes. How do I come up with a Pro Tune? So in my mind, a Pro Tune is always kind of around 870 to 880 in low wind. In low wind. And then when the winds come up, it can be a little bit counterintuitive, but depending on the twist rate, you can actually stabilize that pellet, bringing it down to 850, 860. All right, which is, again, a little bit different than what I've been teaching you, but over the years. But as I learn, my learning evolves, I pass that on to you guys. So there's a little nugget for you. So I came out with 2 Pro Tunes. I wanted to be around 870, 880 with a 25 grain. And the reason I came up with 2 is one had an average of 878 and the other had an average of, oh, I'm missing some data. Hold on, pause. I want to be right back. Don't go anywhere. Okay, sorry, here we go. So I wanted the 2 Pro Tunes because I wanted one to have a velocity of around 878, which is that 880 we talked about, and the other around 875. Those are 2 really good sweet spots. You also get into where your gun might like one more than the other simply from harmonics or the batch of pellets or the tin of pellets or the pellet you choose. So it's good to have 2 to know. All right, so here's the first one. So average 878, nice tight ES, 13 ES, standard deviation 3. Pro level stuff right there. 41 shots at about 43.5 foot-pounds. This is going to be ideal, again, for those 25 grain variants. And yeah, we're down around 47 shots and still around, or 41 shots and still around 43 foot-pounds, but we've really tightened up the harmonics of the gun, where when it goes through its firing cycle, it's not as much of a cough, and it's a little bit more of a snick. And what that can mean is less wasted air behind the pellet, and so you have less turbulence disrupting that pellet's or slug's balance, and you can come away with a cleaner, sharper emergence of the pellet or slug, a cleaner, sharper shot cycle, and you can pick up a little bit of accuracy. That's the beauty of these Pro Tunes. So 25 grain from 4,300 down to 2,000 PSI. Reg setting 2,400. Hammer spring a quarter of a turn clockwise. So there's some learning in there, right? A quarter of a turn makes a difference. And if I started to fiddle with like 1/10 turns from this point, I could probably clean this up even more. But again, I wanted at least half a dozen tunes for you guys. And I already had 3 weeks on it, and I could have spent another 3 weeks fine tuning, but this is designed to, these guides are designed to get you guys in the ballpark, and then you take the knowledge that you've learned here, you apply that to your gun, and then you fine tune that tune to make it the best that it can be for what you're trying to accomplish with the ammo that you're trying to accomplish. Okay, so really, really good stuff there. Fell off the reg at 2,000. Excuse me, I took the shot chart off at 2,000, but fell off at 2,400 because that's where the reg setting was. All right, so Pro Tune 2. This is very interesting. 0 turns clockwise on that hammer spring. So again, it's a difference of only a quarter turn back to the left until it stops. Same reg pressure. So same reg pressure, 2 tunes, just a quarter of a turn difference on the hammer spring. So it just goes to show you the sensitivity on this stuff and how these little micro adjustments can make a lot. Okay, now I've jumped to 48 usable shots from a difference of just a quarter turn. 48 usable shots at 43 foot-pounds instead of 41. So again, that's a learning, that's a nugget. Little adjustments can give you tighter ES, SD, and really increase your efficiency. Extreme spread 14, standard deviation 378, average right at a 875, which is a really good place to be for all of these 25 grain variants. All right. Now again, you'll notice pretty darn flat shot chart. Now this is a good time to point this out. So all of these shot charts, guys, with these reg pressures around 23, 24, 25, kind of in that range, you'll notice that they very slightly descend. And what I saw out of this gun, which wasn't great, was let's say between 3,300 PSI and 4,300 PSI, I'd get a nice level shot chart. So that tells me that that regulator is showing the valve very consistent readings of pressure between 4,300 and 3,300. And every time, as soon as the pressure in the reservoir would dip below 3,300, it was almost like a clock, you'll see that pressure or that velocity starting to come down. So that regulator, as soon as it swung through about shot 20 or that 3,300 PSI mark, would start showing the valve about 100 PSI less pressure. And I saw that phenomenon present no matter what I did, all the way between 2,000 and I want to say 25 or 2,600 PSI reg setting. There's no way around it. Now that being said, as you saw, the shot charts are still nice and flat. And I'm still ESs of 14, 20, 25, 13, this kind of thing. So certainly good enough for 50 and 100 yard work. But it's something I saw that I wanted to pass along to you for you to be aware of if you see it, that I did not see when I reviewed the 22 cal Avenger a couple of years back. So that might just be manufacturing inconsistencies. I mean, we are talking about a $400 gun here. You got to understand, with a $400 gun, if you're buying it for $400, then the guy selling it to you bought it for $200, and then the guy who made it and sold it for $100. So just be comfortable with all of that. That being said, build quality was good, refinement was good. Who knows what longevity will be? That'll be on you guys to determine. But a lot of people have owned these for a lot of years now, and they've been generally good. Warranty is 1 year, by the way, if I'm not mistaken, through Air Venturi, which is also very good because it's part of the Pyramid Air group. But yeah, just something to be aware of. Now, as soon as I started loading that reg pressure up to 26, 27, 28, 29, that went away. And I started getting really consistent across the way, which in their defense, which in Air Venturi's defense, the manual tells you to run that reg up around 2,900 PSI. And here I am running it at like 20, 23, 24, 25. And they may know that the reg for some reason just doesn't do well really at those lower pressures, even though I got it to do really well on the 22 cal a couple of years back. I brought that knowledge to here and I saw that and I wanted to pass that along to you. All right. So similar to the OEM tune, and this is really cool. Let me find this. Digging through my papers over here. Where's my OEM tune? Boom. So I came up with a high power, short range pellet tune designed around the 25 grain pellets. And it's basically a modified OEM tune. I liked that this OEM tune was up around 900 for a 25 grain because I felt like that could provide a little bit more wallop in close, and some of you hunters guys would appreciate that, you know, at the expense of a little bit of accuracy, and you will see the accuracy difference. I saw it at 25, and I'm certain you'll see it at 50. It was literally around that 870, 880, literally stacking in the same hole. Up here around 900, you can see the little diversions where you get another pellet's width in there, so to speak. So I'm going from like a little bit over an 1/8 inch to a little over a 1/4 inch type deal. But the OEM tune was running 903 by 40 shots at 46 foot-pounds. And I liked that concept, but I wanted to really smoothen that out. And that's what I did with this 25 grain high power short range tune. Regulator 2300 PSI. So I dropped the regulator pressure 300 PSI. And 1 turn on the hammer spring as opposed to 1.2 turns. So this is basically the exact same tune, all right, but just 300 PSI less on the regulator, bucking against what the owner's manual says. So what do we learn there? We learn that don't always follow the owner's manual. Go your own way, do your own work, do your own research, and you'll find these nuggets that'll serve you well. And look what I came away with, 42 shots. So I picked up a shot at 45 foot-pounds, but more importantly, I dropped my ES from 28 down to 14, and my SD from 6.5 down to a crack over 4. And look how nice and flat that shot chart is. That is a good useful hunting shot chart, probably out to 40 yards. At 50, you might start seeing some funky stuff where it's opening up to 3/4 of an inch. The pellet will probably the wind will probably aggravate that up around that 900 foot per second range, because those those parachute type of pellets, just they don't really dig that. But this is something that I was really excited about. 1 turn clockwise on that hammer spring, 2300 psi rag, bucking against what the owner's manual says, and actually outdoing the factory as far as the tune. That's certainly something to get excited about. All right, so there was the 22 cal, and I thought that 22 cal Avenger was so cool because I was able to string some staggering efficiency out of it with some really impressive SDs and ESs, and I imagine it would be similar for the 177. But I'm guessing that if you're here and you're interested in the 25 cal, you're here for big power. All right, so I wanted to spend a good solid week on big power. All right, and I came up with 2 tunes. I wanted to try to get as close to 60 foot-pounds as I could out of this rifle. I want to say the Air Venturi and Pyramid website said that the 25 cal is good for like 45 foot-pounds. We blew that out of the water, guys. This thing's running like a top up around 58, 55, 58. And remember that weird descending shot chart thing, which happened about midway on all of this stuff. As soon as I started getting that rag up around 27, 29, we saw that completely vanish, because maybe that's why that manual, like I said, wants us up around that 2900 mark. But so the 34 grain JSB variants are normally going to want a little bit more speed. Like I said, they like to do well up around 890, 900, 910, 920, maybe even 930. But I had really good success with them at 25 yards, running them mid 850s. So I came up with a 33.95 grain Pro Tune that worked out pretty well. Ran it from 4,300 down to 2,500, 858 average, 16 ES, 4 1/4 SD, 21 shots at 55.5 foot-pounds. That is just clobbering it. Okay, this is going to be very ideal for all of the 34 grain variants, to include the Mark IIs, the newer Mark IIs, and the older 34 grain King Heavy. You're just going to have to try them both and see what your barrel and your harmonics like. All right. But really good stuff here. 21 good shots. So I went that far, and things were still sounding good in the gun. And I'm like, okay, well, that's a really good place to be for these pellets for really good accuracy. By the way, this worked really well with the H&N Barracuda 31 grain, 31.02 grain. And those that Hunter's tune worked kind of good with this. And so did the H&M Barracudas, and so did the OEM tune. All right. So I will tell you with this Pro Tune, by the way, because I imagine a lot of you guys are going to ask me, this 34 grain Pro Tune, I tried every slug I had at this, and I couldn't get any of them to stabilize. So I started thinking maybe I needed a little bit more speed. So more speed is what I went after. So I moved the rag up to 2,900 PSI. I think 3,000 is the max. And I didn't want to quite go to the max. I didn't want to like send the message that you should run these things at the max. Even though Air Venturi tells me it's fine, it's not going to hurt anything. I just don't want you guys blowing up your regulators. And more importantly, you don't need to go there to get the performance out of the gun. Because remember, it's all about that balance act between that reg pressure and that valve trying to take bites out of that high pressure area, volume of air. But here it is, 2,900 PSI on the reg, 5.75 turns clockwise on, where were we on this guy? 5.75 turns clockwise on that hammer spring, 4.5 turns here. So I'm getting up on that upper body, or upper range of the hammer. And believe me guys, I tried everything. I had 20, I'm thinking of my Excel spreadsheet on my computer, 22 or 23 shot charts I ran to come away with this 6 for us. But 877 average was max power. I use the JSB 3395 to do my tuning because that's less expensive than the pellets, than slugs. Oof, told you guys I'm having one of those days. 16ES, 4.4 SD, 20 shots at 58 foot-pounds. Crushing it. Again, you're going to want to try it with both the 34 grain and the 34 grain Mark II by JSB. I tried this with the Hades. The Hades, it was too much. It destabilized them. That Hades, by the way, did great with both of those Pro Tunes, and it actually did great with both of those 25 grain Pro Tunes. It actually did great with that Hunter's tune and the OEM tune. Really like the Hades. So if you like that pellet, excuse me, don't be afraid to experiment with any of those tunes. But this is maxed out. This hammer spring, what, has about 5 3/4. I think it had another quarter turn left in it. Maybe 6 1/10, and we went all the way there. And so kind of going all the way back to the beginning of our conversation, guys, if we're running 2900 PSI reg setting, okay, that means that the regulator is showing the valve 2900 PSI. And if you have a low hammer spring setting, when that hammer smacks that valve, it's got so much pressure on this end, it's not going to be able to open into it. And that's why you need to start coming up on that hammer spring to give that valve enough muscle to open into that high pressure body of air so it can start taking bites. And as soon as you get into that area of balance, things really flatten out for you, and you'll get that clean, quick, sharp shot cycle. You'll hear it. But if you look at this shot chart, you'll see a couple of little bumps and divots. I don't know if that's the regulator not showing the valve consistent readings, or if maybe one or the other needed a little tweak. Again, what I want you to come away with is I'm using round numbers, 2900, 5.75, not like 2875 on the reg or 2850, because you're going to need one of these to get down in there and look at that gauge. That's how I was doing it. And to see where you're at. It's just not that big of a gauge, so I'm kind of ballparking it. But when you get in here yourself and you start doing this work, guys, yeah, start at a 2900, but don't be afraid to back it off, a needle's worth or advance at a needle's worth one way or the other. Same thing with that hammer spring setting. You don't need to use round settings of a quarter, a half, 3/4. Move them an eighth, move them a tenth, and you'll clean up any of these shot charts that I've shared with you here. So I would encourage you guys, if you're new to air gunning, to go back and you want to learn more about tuning, go watch some of the FX tuning guides. Go watch the Air Venturi Avenger 22 cal tuning guide. It's all of the same stuff. We're just balancing out forces, and when we get there, we'll start to pick up accuracy. Now, the tuning, the shot charts is really just stage one of accuracy. So let's say you spend the day coming up with this beautiful shot chart at 875 feet per second, but then you get out to testing at 50 and 100 yards, and the accuracy isn't there. Well, another thing to be aware of is you may find great accuracy at 880 or 885. Depending, but not 875. So you'll take that information back home with you, and then you go in search of a tune that is nice and flat and consistent at that 875, 880, 885, wherever your gun wanted to be. So first you come up with a tune, then you go and you test it for velocity, and then once you figure out where the gun wants to be in that velocity area, then you're going to come back to the tune and fine-tune your original tune. Guys, this is what the pros are doing. Those people that you always see on the podium at Extreme Bench Rest, at the Rocky Mountain Air Gun Challenge, at the Pyramid Air Cup, and that 100-yard competition, the guys and gals that you always see winning, this is the work that they've put in. They've also put in the work of batch testing pellets. They know that if they get a box that their barrel likes at 880, and there's serial numbers on those boxes, those are the pellets that you bring to competition. Then you take that a step further, and you sort those pellets for head size to make sure that that's all the same. A lot of people get really caught up in the weight and weighing pellets. Guys, I'm here to tell you, it doesn't really matter. The weight is not nearly as critical as the head size when you're trying to do pellet on pellet at 100 yards and find stability in the wind. So there's another little nugget for you. So I hope that you've kind of come away. You know, I'm trying to evolve these tuning guides, not only for myself, but to try to give you guys the tools to do it yourself instead of just copy what I've put forth here. Because I noticed that was a pattern. People in the wake of the other Air Venturi 2 videos here and on the other channel, they would say, oh, but what were your exact settings? And my answer to them was always, you know, I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm trying to encourage them to do the work of understanding how you get here. Because you can put on the exact setting that I have, and in your gun, it may work okay. But even these exact settings, when I get out to 50 and 100 yards next week, they may not work so okay. So I'm going to go in there and I'm going to start fiddling and tuning again once I find the exact velocity where the accuracy is there. On all of this, was the accuracy there at 25? Yes. Does that suggest that it'll probably be there at 50 and 100? Yes, it does. But you really don't know for sure until you get out there and really start pushing. Then you'll start seeing some funky things happening. All right, so I want to encourage you not to duplicate, but to use these to get in the ballpark, to use the approach and the philosophy that I'm sharing with you, to have that understanding with yourself so that you know what you're trying to accomplish, and take that and have a great experience with your air gun. So with all of that, I have a couple of announcements that I think are really going to get you guys excited. The first one is, if you don't know who Tyler Patner is, get over to Pyramid Air and check out their YouTube channel, and you'll see the Pyramid Air Insider. Tyler Patner is the guy who does all their reviews, who he's basically the face of Pyramid Air on their YouTube channel. But he also happens to be the Air Venturi product manager. I bet a lot of you guys didn't know that. And he had a lot to do with the Avenger rifle and the development of this Avenger Bullpup. Nova Vista, by the way, is I believe their manufacturing partner on all these projects, and he's the guy. He's the guy that knows all this stuff. I will say, for your knowledge, I made sure to not ask him anything throughout the process of my learning, because I didn't want that to be influenced by what he knew or thought he knew. I wanted to discover on my own. That way I could bring you guys the very best information. But what's really cool, so what we're going to do is, I noticed with the last videos I did on the Avenger, you guys had a ton of questions for me for Air Venturi. So what we're going to do is, if you guys have questions for Tyler, we're going to set up a sticky over at the Airgun Nation forum where you can post all of those questions. So you watch this tuning guide here, go ahead and watch my full review of this gun, which will be on the other channel, AEAC Home. And then once you've gone through those 2 videos, get over to the Airgun Nation forum, put your questions up for Tyler, and then I'm going to do a Skype format video with Tyler where we take all of your questions that you've asked and we're going to together answer them. It's going to be like an epic Avenger tuning guide type deal. With that, on this channel, if you're interested in tuning basics, I recently did one with PJ Clark, a tuning guide, which we talked about the Avenger, we talked about FXs, but more importantly, we really talked about how each one of us goes about tuning. And that's a question you guys have had for me a lot. And we talk about in those videos how when we get a gun like this, we back everything out. We back the regulator way off, we back the hammer spring way off, and then we'll pick a regulator pressure and then start going in search of a hammer spring setting that works with that regulator pressure. And we talk a lot about how we go about doing that in that video. So certainly check that out. I think that could be very helpful to you and will be of an interest to you as well. We get into a lot of that. The other thing is, so this Avenger is mine, but this Avenger is going to belong to one of you guys. So over at the Airgun Nation forum, we're going to have a giveaway where you're going to get the gun, you're going to get the scope, you're going to get the mounts, you're going to get a bunch of ammo, you're going to get the Donnie FL Fat Boy. You're not getting my AccuTac bipod. That one's mine Okay, and you're gonna get a brand new. They sent me two. I haven't touched this one yet, so it's totally unmolested. And this is gonna go to one of you guys or gals. So it's a simple lottery-based giveaway over at the Airgun Nation forum where you're gonna pick a random number. You enter it into the body of that thread over there, and then there's gonna be a 10-day event giving you a chance to do that. That will come after this video and after the full review. The full review on the other channel, my other channel, AEAC Home, will kick off that event, and you're going to get a chance to win all of this stuff. We typically do that monthly, so if you're into winning free stuff, you know, AEAC and the Airgun Nation Forum is a good place to live. And just so you guys know, that's not us. That's not us, Michael and I. That's our mutual sponsors wanting to give back to you guys. So when you pipe up in the comments of the video here, when you pipe up in the comments over on AEAC Home or on the Airgun Nation Forum, because the discussion threads to the Avenger are already stickied over there, and they're just going to get bigger after this video. That encourages the sponsors to keep doing, you know, this giving back to you. So thank them. It's not us, and I just wanted to put that out there. So that all being said, there's some tough things going on in the world today. You may or may not know, if you're new here, my wife is Ukrainian. She has a lot of family in Ukraine. And at the end of the day, there's some really, really tough things going on over there. So I have a lot of good sponsors here at AEAC. I think a lot of them, I think a lot of the good Russian people, to be very plain about it. And they make some really great products, but I happen to be married into a family who's going through a lot of hardships right now. So I'm going to have to make some changes here at AEAC in the short term, and I'm not going to be able to represent those Russian brands. And I wanted to make sure you guys knew that that didn't mean that I thought any less of them. These are brands these are very good airgun companies, and I know that the people at the helm and at those companies stand apart from the government of Russia. But on my side, it's just it's a very convoluted, complicated, emotional thing where I just can't in good conscience be supporting those brands right now, while my wife's people are, you know, not to get too dramatic, but you know, they're being killed. So with that, I just wanted to make that brief announcement. Hopefully that'll one day change, but that's kind of where our heart is at the moment. And I just wanted to pass that on to you as heartfeltly and as transparently as I could. I'm still going to support those brands as far as if people ask me questions, I'm going to tell them the truth. Yeah, they're an excellent product. But me being a human being, I just can't be involved in promoting them right now with all this going on. And I really hope you guys understand that. Don't mean to take away from them. It's a tough decision, but it is what it is. So on a lighter note, wherever you guys are, whatever you're doing, I hope this video brightened your day and you learned something from it. If you're into Instagram, my Instagram's Hooked on Air. You can see a lot of pictures and my day-to-day and tech notes there leading up to this video. Facebook is kind of I have Facebook Hooked on Air as well. That's press releases and giant photo packs, post videos, close up of these guns where you can check things out there. And yeah, I'll see you over on the Airgun Nation forum. I'll see you in the comments of this video, and check out AEAC Home in about 2 weeks. I got about a week of work to do filming, and then it's about a week in the chair putting all that video together, and then we'll kick ourselves off an event here. And I'm just realizing that I forgot to let you know that in that AEAC Max Power tune, the FX hybrids were the slug. Saw some good things at 25. Hopefully it holds together at 50 and 100. Man, I tried everything and nothing else that this barrel liked. So there's that. So thanks, guys. Appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you in a few weeks.